evidence now points to a bomb perhaps hidden in luggage that brought down that Russian jetliner in Egypt. Intelligence reports prompted the British government to stop all flights headed back to the UK from the region, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. Now British officials say that tourists can board flights, but their luggage will be sent separately. I'm joined here on the anchor desk by former explosive specialist at Miami International Airport, Afghanistan veteran, and now U.S. congressional candidate Brian Mast. Brian, thanks for your time here on Newsmax Prime. Did the British make the right call, flying passengers on one plane and sending the luggage later?
It's certainly a good route to go. You know, when you have a threat that emanates in this way, where that's all the intelligence points, that's the smart thing to do.
We mentioned earlier that you worked as an explosive specialist at Miami International Airport. Now, CNN is reporting that more intelligence seems to suggest an airport insider in Egypt may have gotten a bomb on board the plane. Is this really the only way for that type of explosive to get on board?
It's not the only way, but that certainly is a very probable part of the narrative. I mean, you can look at whether you're talking about you have access to the internet or YouTube or Inspire magazine. They have articles and videos constantly about ways to sneak items through security and get them on board aircrafts. And when you think about the insider threat, it's not just those that work within aviation right now. Think about within our own country, all the people that have already been fired from TSA.
And you mentioned our own country, and we know about the testing that went on where they said, okay, we're going to designate this as an explosive device like a fake bomb. 95% of those fake bombs got through our screening.
And that was actually a big part of what my work was to design explosive devices day in and day out and attempt to surreptitiously put those through the system in hopes of training those that are screening within TSA.
Well, a 95% failure rate, that does not bode well for the flying public. About 30 seconds for the last word.
That's exactly right, but that's the thing with bombing. Bombing is up to the creativity of the bomber, so we're constantly being in a reactionary state, and unfortunately when it comes to those conducting radical Islamic terrorists, it's often a case of monkey see, monkey do. What they see some other terrorists do, they're going to try to do here in our country.
So, what we saw over Egypt, we should be on the lookout for in our own skies.
Absolutely. That's why people take off their shoes from TSA right now. That's why people can't carry water bottles through security because of something that already happened.
Brian Mast, former explosives technician at Miami International Airport, Afghanistan veteran, and of course, candidate for Congress. Sir, you have our thanks. Let's continue this conversation now with terrorism expert Raymond Ibrahim. Raymond is Skyping in from an undisclosed location. Raymond, ISIS claims responsibility for the downed plane. You're very familiar with what's going on in Egypt. How powerful a force is ISIS now in Egypt?
Well, the thing that really strikes me about all that we're discussing is basically, terrorism, if it is in fact an ISIS-related act of terrorism, bombing, and so forth, is always a reflection of weakness. And a lot of this is actually taking or creating a distraction for what's happening to ISIS by the Russians. So on the one hand, by attacking and targeting Russia, if in fact it is ISIS, that clearly demonstrates that the Islamic State sees Russia as its enemy. And because why are you attacking it? Because obviously they're doing something. And in fact, if you look at what's happening right now to the Islamic State by Russia, they're, according to a lot of reports, they're bombarding them heavily. Hundreds or several hundreds of targets, last I checked, have been actually hit. So I think a lot of this you have to keep in the context of we're weak, we're being attacked by Russia, and now we want revenge. So we're going to attack civilians in a plane. And I think that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is this actually, if it is terrorism, affects in a negative way Egypt a lot more, I think, than Russia, because it's going to have a dramatic toll on its tourism, Egyptian tourism, which was slightly improving after all these revolutions, and now it's again going to take a nosedive, so it's going to affect the economy. So in many ways, this is actually more a negative effect on Egypt.
Raymond, obviously you know whereof you speak. You're the author of 2 books, The Al-Qaeda Reader and Crucified Again. And again, given your familiarity with Egypt, what about the strength of Egyptian President al-Sisi? Is he going to be able to handle these new attacks? And what does this do economically to Egypt in terms of tourism?
Exactly. And so in many ways, it's sort of the same old, same old. I think a lot of people and analysts get caught up with these terms, ISIS, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and so forth, when the smartest way to look at it is just Islamic jihadi ideology and terrorism. And in fact, it's very much embedded in the fabric of Egypt and in the Sinai and all throughout, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood manifestations or the Salafis or ISIS-related people. So Sisi, I'm impressed so far. He's made very good remarks. He said things that his predecessors never said. He pointed out that there is violence and intolerance in Islamic texts. We need to do something about it. So in that regards, he's at least moving in the right directions. But in the other sense, we're talking about an issue that is just endemic to Egypt, to the Muslim world, because it's part of the religion. So it's not something that is easily uprooted. And that's really the difficulty that all these Arab secular leaders and so forth face. They always have to kind of go one step forward, two steps back. They engage in these anti-terrorist sort of movements and attack the ideology, but they can't be seen going too far because then they get denounced as apostates, and then even more Muslims or Islamist types start hating them. Has
President al-Sisi been successful in dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood, or is that faction still out there in a reality? 20 seconds.
He has been, from an organizational point of view, defanging it. But as I was saying, these groups morph into each other. So a lot of the people who we would say are Muslim Brotherhood types that have been neutralized in that context have been morphed into other groups in Egypt and elsewhere, including ISIS.
Raymond Ibrahim, we thank you very much for your time and your perspective tonight on Newsmax Prime. After the break, our president says diplomacy is the best way to solve problems in the Middle East. We'll hear what a United States congressman has to say about that. Coming up.